A decorated Air Force pilot is facing a disciplinary review and could soon be kicked out of the military. He is accused of abusing his wife, but did the Air Force miss the signs that Major Chad Bushman was battling post-traumatic stress disorder? CNN's Ed Lavandera explores what happened in the years after Major Bushman returned from war.
Air Force Major Chad Bushman piloted C-130 planes into the Iraq and Afghanistan war zones.
I can remember seeing the missile streak come past the front of the aircraft. That was the most terrifying experience of my life.
He thought only ground troops could suffer PTSD, so when he came home from war in 2004, Major Bushman says he tried to settle into a normal routine with his wife, Tori. But looking back now, Bushman says intense anger brewed inside him.
And so you'd snap. And it's easier to burst emotion with anger as opposed to actually trying to be vulnerable and talking about it. I really didn't think there was a problem. I could, justify everything.
When a soldier returns from war, they're supposed to fill this out, a post-deployment health reassessment survey. It can help figure out if a soldier needs treatment for PTSD. This is Major Bushman's survey. He says he wasn't asked to fill it out until January of 2008, 4 years after his tours of duty. A military attorney in charge of the case says they don't dispute Bushman's claim. When he finally did fill out the survey, he didn't know that his life was about to hit rock bottom.
At what point did you realize that you weren't yourself?
When I was arrested.
In this 5-page sworn statement, Tori Bushman laid out in painful detail her husband's abuse. It's really hard to read. Verbal attacks that escalated into physical abuse, choking, and even threatening to kill her. After this, the Air Force ordered Major Bushman to have no contact with his wife.
What was it like being arrested?
Horrible. Worst experience of my life. It's shameful in a nutshell. I mean, there's no other way around it. There's no honor to it.
The Air Force wouldn't talk about Bushman's case on camera, but a military attorney tells CNN Major Bushman didn't show any signs of problems between 2004 and the day he was arrested in 2008. He never asked for help and performed his duties well. After his arrest, a military psychologist looked at the veteran pilot's post-deployment survey. Bushman's attorney says the psychologist found that the telltale signs for PTSD had been festering for years.
Very clear that he had PTSD. They didn't diagnose him, and that, but for their failure to diagnose him, we probably wouldn't be here.
I'm excited. I'm nervous.
Even though the Air Force is trying to discharge Chad Bushman,
anxious?
I'll throw up.
You might be surprised to hear he's got the full support of one important person.
He's sneaking up on me.
This was the moment Chad and Tori Bushman reunited for the first time in almost 2 years. After learning about her husband's PTSD, she's giving this marriage another chance.
What made you want to stand by him?
Just knowing who he was before all this started happening, the man I fell in love with, and he was sick and needed help, and I didn't want to give up on him.
Have you tried telling the Air Force, hey, look, I'm on his side on this one?
They just see him as a bad man, and they want to get rid of him, and they're not taking into account the situation or what he's done for our country or what we've done as, what we've suffered as a family.
Tori Bushman is standing by her pilot, but it might not be enough to save Major Chad Bushman's military career.
And Ed Lavandera joins us live now. Ed, what happens to Major Chad Bushman next?
Well, you heard us mention there in the story that Major Bushman was going through the process of a court-martial, but his wife refused to cooperate with prosecutors. So the Air Force has essentially dismissed that and is not going down that road. So next week, Major Bushman faces what the military calls a non-judicial punishment, which is essentially he will appear before a 3-member panel. It'll look and sound a lot like a trial. His side will put on witnesses, talk about the PTSD treatment and the symptoms and that sort of thing. The military will build its case, and essentially the question for this panel is to determine whether or not it's in the Air Force's best interest to retain and keep Major Chad Bushman. This 3-member panel will issue a recommendation, and this is a decision that will be made at the highest levels by the Secretary of the Air Force.